Good morning, Dr. Sloan here, and welcome to COM 4100 in Canvas. I hope that you've kind of perused what you can of the course, and if you have any questions about how to use Canvas, or if you have questions about our first week, including what has been assigned to you, which I'm scrolling through right now, or the expectations of any of those assignments, please don't hesitate to send me an email and I'll try to answer your question. Just know that here in the overview, everything that is read will actually link out to what that component of the course. So it's kind of helpful if you have, in each week, it's helpful to come here to this overview page and know what is expected of you. So what I really want to do for you is each week I'm going to post a video that includes a quick summary of what the chapter is about, as well as a pronunciation of the ethicist and the ethical framework that that chapter addresses. And I'm doing this because in the past I've noticed that a lot of the online communication students, when you're only reading a name or a difficult word and you've never heard it, then you might go out into the world and just think what you're reading in your brain is the correct way to pronounce something. But you guys are so smart and you self-motivate and learn so much content in these online classes. And so I thought it would be useful to also hear pronunciations, because that's also part of the learning, that when you go out in the world that you sound as educated as you are. So I'm going to click here on read, and that'll bring us to the Module 1 required reading page. So you'll read chapters 3 and 5. Those are required readings this week. And then you get to pick one chapter from part 1 of the textbook. And then you'll also read this PDF over here about utilitarianism. So I've pulled up our textbook online just so we have something to look at instead of me holding the textbook here. And our textbook was written by Christians and Merrill. And since the textbook was published in 2009, you would say or write Christians and Merrill 2009. Each of the actual chapters are written by a different person, and so that's why in your weekly summary and application form that you fill out, you actually identify who wrote the chapter so that you can refer correctly to the author. So I'm just going to overview what's going on here in week 1. The textbook is broken into 5 parts, which is great because we have 5 weeks here in communication ethics. And so for week 1, we'll be reading or discussing the chapters in part 1. And part 1 addresses altruistic stances, or another way of saying that is all of the ethical frameworks, all of the ways of thinking about ethics that we'll read this week are focused on altruism. And your opening page for each stance will define that stance as well, so that'll be helpful for you. So chapter 1 is written by Merrill 2009, and what Merrill sets out to do is to summarize the Dalai Lama's writings and teachings. And so Merrill 2009 makes the claim that the Dalai Lama is about teaching universal compassion. So if you had to summarize really what the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, whose name is Tenzin Gyatso, what he's teaching is to be compassionate to all, universally compassionate. Chapter 2, written by Hulse 2009, she is trying to summarize the many complicated teachings of Jesus. And so she summarizes all of that by saying Jesus is about and instructs us to love others, love our neighbors. Chapter 3 is written by Cohen Almagor or Almagor. It's less important that you get the author's last names and more important that you get the ethicist. So 2009, and the writing is about John Stuart Mill and utilitarianism. And you also have to read this PDF about utilitarianism. And the reason for that is if you study ethics in any discipline, business, in psychology, in communication, and whatever, philosophy, there are some ethical theories that all people would be familiar with in a foundational ethics class. Utilitarian is one of those. It's one of the widely known, discussed, debated, and applied ethical theories in the world. And so I didn't want you guys to breeze past it. This would be something that you would want to know if someone found out you took an ethics class, you would be able to discuss utilitarianism. Which Mill basically makes the argument that everything should have a utility, a purpose, and obviously in the altruism section that means a purpose that serves others or helps others. Chapter 4, written by Wilkins, 2009, is a summary of Carol Gilligan's writings and research. And Carol Gilligan is actually a feminist scholar, which means that she writes trying to articulate a feminist or feminine point of view versus the male-dominated writing for centuries and centuries. And so it's a neat chapter in that she kind of turns the world of ethics on its head, because so often when we talk about ethics, we're talking about logically making a decision. And she says, well, what if from our earliest time of life, women are taught to care for others, and that's so fundamentally ingrained in women that sometimes we can't make the ethical choice in terms of logic. We make the ethical choice in terms of what is within us to care for another. And that might very much be to our detriment, that to care for another costs sleepless nights or this or that. And so it's just a different way of thinking about ethics, kind of apart from logic. And so it kind of comes from a feminist perspective. Babcock, 2009, attempts to summarize Martin Luther King Jr.'s many teachings and speakings and leadership, and does an interesting job of summarizing all of his teachings with this phrase, ethics of personalism. And in lots of the ethics classes I've debated, I have taught, it ends up coming up for debate among the students of why Babcock chose to use the phrase ethics of personalism. That phrase does not come from King directly. So if I may, I believe William Babcock, is trying to say King follows the Christian doctrine, so his life, he follows Jesus Christ, and who is a personal God, and he has a personal relationship with God. And so everything about Martin Luther King's life and teaching is about civic duty, civic justice, social justice, and all of that comes from, or is prompted within him from his personal faith, and so it's kind of this personal relationship with Jesus that informs everything he's about in the world. Might be a way of summarizing this phrase, ethics of personalism. The 6th chapter in part 1 is written by Hume, 2009, and Hume attempts to summarize Mother Teresa's readings and speakings, and of course her actual living, her life. And the summary of that is that Mother Teresa was a person of sacrifice, that she lived in the slums and served the overlooked and unlovable, and just sacrificed her own body and wellness and bread, and just to care for everyone, and that is also rooted from her faith system. So these 6 chapters comprise part 1, and all 6 of these chapters are part of this altruistic perspective or stance. So think of each stance as an umbrella under which the various chapters or ethical frameworks fit. You'll notice as we get further into our class that you can argue that a chapter that is categorized here, for example, in the altruistic stance, might also fit further down in the communitarian stance, or of course Moses, who writes about the 10 Commandments, the deontological ethics, that would also fit here with an altruistic stance. So yes, some of the frameworks, some of the chapters can fit under different umbrellas, but Christians in Merrill 2009 are just trying to give us a way of organizing different ethical frameworks so that we kind of have a jumping off point of talking about ethics. So this, again, think of the stances as the umbrella and the various chapters as the ethical frameworks, which are ways of thinking about ethics, or to me, the most helpful way of thinking about a framework is that it's a lens. And so you can literally put on this lens and say, okay, I'm going to look at the world from this ethical perspective, from utilitarianism, or I'm going to look at the world from a different ethical perspective, like Aristotle's self-development. So each framework is a lens by which we can think about ethics or see the world and apply ethics. Okay, this video is a bit longer, hopefully, than others because I'm trying to give you some terminology too connected to our textbook. In the future, I'll try to focus just on pronouncing some of these interesting names that pop up in our reading so that you are articulate in the future as you talk about ethicists and ethical theories. Welcome to class.